Night fell softly over the small American town of Millbrook, bringing with it a fine drizzle that covered the streets with an ethereal glow. The lamps were lit one by one, creating an almost magical scene in the central square. It was on this makeshift stage that Chloe, a young girl of 17, was preparing for another night of performance. Her thin, calloused fingers were adjusting the strings of the worn guitar she had inherited from her mother. The instrument, although old, still emanated a sweet, melancholy sound, as if it carried with it all the stories and dreams of its previous owner. Chloe took a deep breath, feeling the humid air fill her lungs, and began to sing. Her voice, pure and crystalline, rose above the noise of the city. It was a sad but hopeful melody that spoke of love, loss, and the strength to move on. People passing by slowed down, some stopping to listen. An elderly man, leaning on his cane, smiled kindly and dropped a few coins into the open guitar case. "Thank you," Chloe murmured between verses, without interrupting the song. As the evening progressed, more people gathered to listen. Some stayed for just one song, others for several. A couple of lovers danced softly to the sound of Chloe's angelic voice. For a moment, she allowed herself to dream that she was on a big stage, with thousands of fans singing along. But reality soon pulled her back. Every coin that dropped into the box was a small victory, a step closer to the treatment her mother so desperately needed. Chloe sang with even more fervor, as if her voice could reach the heavens and bring the cure she so desperately craved. When the clock in the square struck midnight, Chloe finally stopped. Her vocal cords ached, her fingers were numb, but there was a glint of determination in her green eyes. She quickly counted out the money. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. With the guitar on her back and the money secure in her pocket, Chloe hurried through the dark streets towards her home. The neighborhood where she lived was simple, with small houses and shabby gardens. When she got home, she opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake her mother. But Sarah, his mother, was awake, sitting on the makeshift bed in the living room. Her once beautiful face was pale and scarred by illness, but her eyes still shone with love at the sight of her daughter. "How was today, darling?" Sarah asked, her voice weak but full of affection. Chloe forced a smile, hiding her disappointment. "It was good, Mom. People liked the new songs." Sarah held out her hand and Chloe took it, feeling the comforting warmth. "You shouldn't try so hard, my love. You need to think about yourself, too." "I'm fine, Mom," Chloe replied, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll get the money for your treatment, you'll see." Sarah smiled sadly, stroking her daughter's cheek. "You already do so much for me, Chloe. Your music, it's the best medicine I could have." Chloe hugged her mother gently, afraid of hurting her. They stayed like that for a long moment, sharing strength and love in silence. The next morning, Chloe woke up early, her eyes heavy from a bad night's sleep. She prepared a simple coffee and some porridge for her mother, getting everything organized before leaving for school. The walk to school was a daily ordeal. Chloe kept her head down, her headphones firmly in place, trying to block out the stares and whispers, but it didn't always work. "Look, the beggar in the corner has arrived," a mocking voice echoed down the corridor. Chloe felt her face burn but kept walking, pretending not to hear. It was Brittany, the cheerleader, and her group of followers. "Hey, Chloe!" Brittany shouted. "How much did you win yesterday? Did you manage to buy lunch today?" Laughter echoed down the corridor. Chloe clenched her fists, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She wanted to scream, to tell them about her mother, about how much she needed that money. But the words got stuck in her throat. She was saved by the sound of the bell, signaling the start of classes. Chloe ran to her classroom, grateful for the momentary escape. The lessons passed in a blur. Chloe tried to concentrate, knowing that a good education was her only chance of a better future. But her thoughts kept returning to her mother, to the mounting medical bills, to the music she dreamed of composing. During her lunch break, Chloe hid in the library. It was her refuge, a place where she could escape the stares and whispers. Sitting in a hidden corner, she opened her battered notebook and began to scribble down lyrics. The words flowed from her pen, expressing all the pain, fear, and hope she carried. It was a song about her mother, about fighting against adversity, about never giving up. Chloe hummed quietly, trying out melodies, lost in her own world. "That's beautiful." A soft voice surprised her. Chloe looked up, startled, to see Emily, a quiet classmate, standing there. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," Emily said, smiling shyly. "I just heard you singing and I thought it was amazing." Chloe blushed, quickly closing her notebook. "Thanks," she mumbled. Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I know we're not friends or anything, but I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks like Brittany and the others. Your music, it touches people, you know." Emily's words hit Chloe like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. She felt the tears she had been holding back all day finally fall. "Thank you," Chloe said again, this time with more strength in her voice. "That means a lot." Emily smiled once more before walking away, leaving Chloe with a small but significant sense of hope. The rest of the school day passed more easily. Emily's words echoed in Chloe's mind, giving her the strength to face the stares and whispers. When classes ended, Chloe left quickly, anxious to get home and see her mother. On the way, she stopped at the pharmacy to buy Sarah's medicine with the money she had earned the night before. The sky was overcast, threatening rain again. Chloe looked up, letting a few drops fall on her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, making a silent plea to the universe. "Please," she whispered to the gray sky, "give me the strength to go on, for me and for my mother." With a deep sigh, Chloe adjusted the strap of her backpack and continued on her way home. Night was approaching, and with it, another chance to sing, to dream, to fight. Because for Chloe, every note was a note of hope. Every coin was a step towards healing her mother. Every day was an opportunity to prove that her voice and her love were stronger than any adversity. And so, with a heavy but determined heart, Chloe moved on, ready to face another night of music and dreams in the town square, carrying with her the weight of the world and the lightness of a melody not yet sung. Night fell over Millbrook, bringing with it a cool breeze that made the leaves on the trees dance gently. Chloe was adjusting her guitar in the central square, her usual place to perform. The streetlights created a soft glow around her, as if it were a makeshift stage lit just for her. Taking a deep breath, Chloe began to play. Her fingers glided over the strings with a familiarity born of endless hours of practice. The melody that emerged was new, the fruit of her reflections after meeting Emily in the library. It was a song about hope in the midst of darkness, about finding light in the most unexpected places. His voice, pure and crystalline, rose above the hustle and bustle of the city. People passing by began to slow down, some stopping to listen. A small group began to form around her, attracted by the beauty of the music and the palpable emotion in Chloe's voice. Among the passers-by, one man stood out. Tall, with gray hair and deep-set eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world, he stopped abruptly when he heard Chloe's voice. His name was Max Holloway, a former musician who had lost his passion for music after a tragic accident years ago. Max stood motionless, as if hypnotized by the young singer's voice. There was something about Chloe's performance that touched him deeply, awakening long-buried memories and emotions. He closed his eyes, letting himself be enveloped by the melody, feeling each note resonate in his being. When Chloe finished the song, the applause was warm. She smiled shyly, thanking him with a nod. People began to disperse, some leaving coins and notes in the open guitar case. Max, however, remained. He watched Chloe thank each person who contributed, noticing the gleam of gratitude in her eyes. When the crowd had dissipated, he approached slowly. "That was extraordinary," said Max, his voice hoarse with emotion. Chloe looked up in surprise. "Thank you," she replied, a faint blush tinging her cheeks. "Did you write that song?" Max asked, genuinely curious. Chloe nodded. "Yes, it's a new composition. I'm still working on it." Max smiled, a gesture that seemed out of place on his face marked by worry lines. "Well, it's amazing. You have a rare gift, you know that?" Chloe lowered her eyes, fiddling nervously with the strings of her guitar. "Thank you," she murmured. I'm just trying to express what I feel." Max nodded understandingly. "That's how the best songs are born, from the soul." There was a moment of silence between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the city. Chloe looked at Max curiously. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite identify. "Are you a musician?" she finally asked. Max let out a short, almost bitter laugh. "I was, a long time ago." Chloe's eyes widened at the sudden recognition. "Wait, are you Max Holloway?" "Max Holloway?" Max looked surprised and a little uncomfortable with the recognition. "Yes, that's me, but that was a long time ago." Chloe couldn't contain her excitement. "My mom has all your albums. She used to play your songs for me when I was little." A sad smile flashed across Max's face. "It's nice to know that someone still remembers." Chloe hesitated for a moment, then asked softly, "Why did you stop making music?" Max's expression darkened, and for a moment Chloe feared she had gone too far. But then he answered, his voice low and charged with emotion. "Sometimes life takes from us the things we love most, and sometimes we throw them away ourselves." Chloe nodded, feeling the weight of Max's words. She knew well the feeling of loss, of fighting against circumstances beyond her control. "But you," Max continued, his tone changing to something lighter, "you have something special. Something you don't see every day." Chloe blushed again. "I'm just trying to help my mom," she said softly. Max tilted his head, curious. "Your mom?" Chloe hesitated for a moment, but something in Max's expression encouraged her to continue. "She's sick. I sing here every night to try and raise money for her treatment." Max's eyes softened with understanding and compassion. "That's very noble of you," he said gently. Chloe shrugged, trying to look stronger than she felt. "It's the least I can do. She's always been there for me." Max was silent for a moment, seeming to ponder something. Then he said, "You know, I have a recording studio. It's not much, but if you want, we could record some of your songs. Professionally." Chloe's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. "Really? You'd do that?" Max smiled, and this time the gesture seemed more natural. "Of course, your talent deserves to be heard by more people. And who knows, it might help with your mother's medical expenses." Chloe felt tears forming in her eyes. She held them back, determined not to cry in front of this stranger who was being so kind. I don't know what to say. Thank you." "No need to thank me," Max said softly. "Sometimes music has the power to heal not only the listener, but also the maker." They exchanged contact information, and Max promised to call the next day to iron out the details. As he drove away, Chloe stared at the card in his hands, hardly believing what had happened. That evening, on her way home, Chloe felt as if she were floating. She went in quietly, not wanting to wake her mother, but Sarah was awake, waiting for her as usual. "How was today, darling?" Sarah asked, her voice weak but full of love. Chloe sat down next to her mother's bed, holding her hand. "Mom, you won't believe what happened," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. As Chloe told her about her meeting with Max, Sarah listened intently, a smile growing on her tired face. "Oh, Chloe," she said when her daughter had finished, "this is wonderful. You deserve this opportunity." Chloe squeezed her mother's hand. "This is for both of us, Mom. I'm going to make this work, you'll see." Sarah stroked Chloe's cheek. "I know you will, my love. You've always been strong, stronger than I've ever been." Chloe felt the tears she had been holding back before finally fall. "I learned from the best," she whispered. That night, while her mother slept, Chloe lay awake, her mind filled with melodies and possibilities. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of a future beyond the streets of Millbrook, beyond the medical bills and the lonely nights singing in the square. As sleep finally enveloped her, Chloe murmured a silent prayer of thanks. For her mother, for Max, for Emily, for all those who had shown kindness in the midst of the darkness, and above all, for the music that continued to flow through her, a constant river of hope in a world that often seemed devoid of it. With the soft sound of her mother's breathing like a lullaby, Chloe fell asleep, dreaming of melodies not yet written and stages not yet conquered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities, and Chloe was ready to face them, one note at a time. The sun had barely risen when Chloe woke up, her heart beating with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Today was the day she would enter a recording studio for the first time, the day her dream began to take tangible shape. She dressed carefully, choosing her best blouse, a simple but clean garment with no rips. Her fingers trembled slightly as she combed her hair, trying to tame the unruly curls. "You look lovely, darling," Sarah's soft voice sounded from the makeshift bed in the living room. Chloe turned around, surprised to see her mother up so early. "Mom, you should be resting," Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and concern. "How could I sleep in on such an important day for my little girl?" Chloe knelt beside the bed, holding her mother's hand. "What if I'm not good enough, Mom? What if Mr. Holloway realizes he's made a mistake?" Sarah squeezed Chloe's hand with all the strength she could muster. "Chloe, my love, you have a gift that not even pain or poverty has been able to take away from you. Go out there and show the world the light you carry within you." Her mother's words calmed Chloe's troubled heart. She kissed Sarah's forehead, promising to come back soon, and went out into the cool Millbrook morning. Max's studio was a few blocks away, in an old building that had seen better days. Chloe stopped in front of the door, her guitar firmly in hand, and took a deep breath before ringing the bell. The door opened, revealing Max. He smiled at the sight of her, a smile that seemed to light up his tired face. "Welcome, Chloe. Ready to do some magic?" Chloe nodded, unable to contain a nervous smile. She followed Max inside, her eyes widening as she saw the interior of the studio. It was smaller than she had imagined, but still impressive. Sophisticated recording equipment took up most of the space, lights flickering softly on the control panels. "Wow," Chloe whispered in amazement. Max laughed softly. "Impressive, isn't it? But remember, Chloe, the equipment is just a tool. The real magic comes from within." He guided her into a small recording room, separated from the control room by a large glass panel. "This will be your stage today," he said, gesturing to the microphone in the center of the room. Chloe entered hesitantly, feeling as if she was treading on holy ground. She positioned her guitar, adjusted the microphone, and put on the headphones Max had handed her. "Okay, Chloe," Max's voice sounded through the headphones. "Let's start with something simple. How about that song you were singing in the square when we met?" Chloe nodded, closing her eyes for a moment to center herself. When she opened them again, she saw Max in the control room, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. She began to play, her fingers dancing over the strings of the guitar. Her voice, initially shaky, gained strength as the song progressed. It was the song she had composed thinking of her mother, of her daily struggle, of her unwavering hope. As she sang, Chloe lost herself in the music. The studio disappeared, and she was back in the square, singing to the stars and to all those who stopped to listen. She sang to her mother, to Emily, to Max, to everyone who had shown her kindness on her journey. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Chloe opened her eyes, fearing what she would see. Max was standing motionless, an expression of astonishment on his face. Slowly, he pressed the intercom button. "Chloe," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "That was extraordinary." Relief flooded over Chloe, bringing with it a wave of tears that she struggled to hold back. "Really?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Max entered the recording room, his eyes shining in a way Chloe hadn't seen before. "Chloe, in all my years in the music industry, I've never heard anything so pure, so honest. You have a rare gift, young lady." Max's words were like a balm for all the doubts and insecurities Chloe had been carrying around for so long. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her whole face. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway," she said softly. "Max," he corrected with a smile. "I think we can dispense with the formalities after this." They spent the rest of the morning recording more songs. Chloe played some covers of her favorite songs, but it was her original compositions that really shone. Each song was a window into her soul, revealing layers of emotion and experience that seemed beyond her years. During a break, while Chloe was resting her voice with a glass of water, Max approached with a serious expression. "Chloe," he began, "what do you think about us recording an EP? 4 or 5 songs, something we can use to showcase your talent to some people I know in the industry." Chloe's eyes widened. "Really? You think I have a chance?" Max smiled, that smile that seemed to light up his whole tired face. "Chance? Chloe, you have more than a chance. You have a gift that can't be taught or manufactured. It's something rare and precious." Chloe felt the tears forming in her eyes again. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Max replied simply. "Say yes to your music, to your talent, to your future." Chloe took a deep breath, thinking of her mother, of all the nights singing in the square, of all the dreams she barely dared to dream. "Yes," she finally said, her voice firm and clear. "Yes, I want to do it." The rest of the day passed in a blur of music and emotion. When they finally finished, the sun was already setting, painting the Millbrook sky with shades of orange and pink. "You were amazing today, Chloe," Max said as he walked her to the door. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we start working in earnest on that EP." Chloe nodded, exhausted but elated. "Thanks for everything, Max. I can't thank you enough." Max smiled, a smile that seemed to carry a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "Just keep singing, Chloe. Keep sharing your light with the world." As she walked home, Chloe felt as if she were floating. The world around her seemed brighter, more full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of a future beyond the streets of Millbrook, beyond the medical bills and the lonely nights. When she got home, she found her mother awake, anxiously waiting for news. "How was it, dear?" Sarah asked, her eyes shining with anticipation. Chloe sat on the side of the bed, holding her mother's hand. "It was amazing, Mom," she said, her voice brimming with emotion. "Max wants to record an EP with me. He thinks that I have a real chance." Sarah smiled, tears of joy shining in her eyes. "Oh, Chloe," she whispered, "I always knew you were special. The world is finally seeing what I've always seen." That night, while her mother slept, Chloe lay awake, going over the day's events in her mind. She picked up her battered notebook and began to write, the words flowing from her pen like a torrent. It was a new song, a song about dreams coming true, about hope blooming even in the most unlikely places. A song about a girl who sang in the square and a man who rediscovered his passion for music. As the first lights of dawn began to tint the sky, Chloe finally fell asleep, a soft smile on her lips. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities, and she was ready to face them, one note at a time. The sun had barely risen when Chloe woke up, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Today was the day her EP would be released on digital platforms, the day her voice, her stories would be heard by people beyond the streets of Millbrook. She got up quietly, taking care not to wake her mother, who was asleep on the sofa bed in the small living room. Sarah had spent a difficult night, with pains that not even medications seemed to relieve. Chloe felt a twinge of guilt for being so excited at a time like this, but pushed the thought away. Her mother had always said that Chloe's music was the best medicine. With light steps, she went into the kitchen and prepared a simple cup of coffee. The familiar aroma filled the small apartment, bringing a little normality to a day that promised to be anything but normal. "Good morning, darling," Sarah's husky voice sounded from the living room. Chloe rushed to her mother's side, a glass of water in one hand and her morning medication in the other. "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling?" Sarah smiled weakly, accepting the medicine. "Better now that I see you. Today's the big day, isn't it?" Chloe nodded, a mixture of excitement and fear reflected in her eyes. "It is, Mom. At 10 a.m., the EP will be available on all platforms." Sarah reached out, stroking her daughter's cheek. "I'm so proud of you, my love. You deserve all the success in the world." Her mother's words warmed Chloe's heart, giving her the courage she needed to face the day. With one last hug for Sarah, she left for school, her cell phone clutched tightly in her hand like a talisman. At school, Chloe could barely concentrate on her lessons. Her eyes constantly wandered to the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until 10 a.m. When the time finally came, she discreetly reached for her cell phone, her hands shaking slightly as she opened the streaming app. And there it was, Notes of Hope by Chloe Bennett. 5 tracks that represented months of hard work, sleepless nights, and shed tears. Chloe felt her heart race when she saw her mother's name on the dedication. During the lunch break, Chloe hid in her usual corner of the library, headphones firmly in place. She listened to each track, reliving the moments of recording, the laughs with Max, the discussions about arrangements. Each note was a memory, each chord a promise of a better future. It was then that she noticed. Comments were starting to appear under the tracks. People from places she had never heard of were listening to her music, sharing their impressions. "That voice is amazing. Who is that girl? She sings with so much emotion. The lyrics to Lullaby for Mom made me cry. So beautiful and honest." Chloe felt tears forming in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, not wanting to draw attention to herself, but her heart was overflowing with emotion. As she left the library, Chloe noticed something different. The gazes that had previously followed her with disdain or pity were now full of curiosity. Whispers accompanied her through the corridors, but they were no longer taunts. "That's her, the girl from the EP. Have you heard her music? It's amazing." Brittany, the cheerleader who used to torment her, approached with a forced smile. "Hey, Chloe, I heard your song. It's not as bad as I expected." Chloe blinked, surprised by the quasi-praise. "Thanks, Brittany," she replied softly, deciding not to feed any negativity. The rest of the day passed in a blur. When school ended, Chloe rushed home, eager to share the news with her mother. When she got home, however, she was greeted by an unexpected scene. Max was there, sitting next to Sarah, both with expressions of barely contained excitement. "Chloe!" Max exclaimed on seeing her. "You won't believe what's happened." Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling in a way that Chloe hadn't seen for a long time. "Tell her, Max. My little girl deserves to know." Max stood up, barely able to contain his excitement. "Chloe, your EP is exploding. In just a few hours, it's already been shared by several influencers. The views are going up by the minute." Chloe felt her legs go weak. She leaned on the wall, trying to process the information. "But how? I'm just a girl from Millbrook." "A girl from Millbrook with extraordinary talent," Max corrected gently. "And people are recognizing that. Look." He showed Chloe his tablet. On the screen, she saw tweets, Instagram posts, TikTok videos, all talking about her music. "That's not all," Max continued. "I've had calls from several record companies. They want to meet you, Chloe. They want to hear more." Chloe looked at her mother, seeking anchorage in this maelstrom of emotions. Sarah was smiling, tears of joy in her eyes. "Go on, my love. The world is waiting for you." Just then, Chloe's cell phone rang. It was Emily, her schoolmate. "Chloe, you need to see this. There's a crowd gathering in the square where you usually sing. They're asking for you." Chloe looked at Max and her mother, a mixture of fear and excitement in her eyes. Max nodded encouragingly. "Go on, Chloe. Show them who you are." Heart pounding, Chloe picked up her guitar and left. The streets of Millbrook, which she knew so well, seemed different now. People recognized her, pointed, smiled. When she reached the square, Chloe was paralyzed. Dozens, maybe hundreds of people were there, some holding placards with her name on them, others humming her songs. Emily ran up to her, hugging her tightly. "You did it, Chloe. You're a star." Trembling slightly, Chloe climbed onto the small makeshift stage. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her mother, of Max, of all the nights singing in that same square. And then she began to sing. Her voice, pure and emotional, rose into the Millbrook night. People joined her, singing along, creating a chorus of hope and celebration. At that moment, under the stars of her hometown, Chloe felt she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The future was uncertain, full of promises and challenges, but she was ready to face it. One note at a time, one song at a time, she would share her music with the world. As the last note of her song faded into the air, Chloe looked out at the crowd, her heart overflowing with gratitude. This was only the beginning of her journey, but what an incredible beginning it was. The sun had barely risen when Chloe was woken by the insistent ringing of her cell phone. She blinked, trying to shake off the sleepiness, and looked at the device. It was Max. "Chloe, you need to see this." Max's voice sounded excited on the other end of the line. "Your EP is in the top 10 in 3 different countries." Chloe sat up abruptly, the reality of her new life hitting her like a wave. In the last few weeks, since the EP's release, everything had been a whirlwind. Interviews, photo shoots, meetings with record company executives. It was as if she had been plucked out of Millbrook and thrown into a completely new and dizzying world. "This is incredible," she managed to say, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "And there's more," Max continued, barely containing his excitement. "Starlight Records wants to sign you. They're offering you a substantial advance, and they want you to start working on a full album straight away." Chloe felt her heart race. Starlight Records was one of the biggest record labels in the country. Signing with them would mean resources, exposure, opportunities she'd never dreamed of having. I don't know what to say, Max," she stammered. "Say yes, Chloe," Max replied, his voice softening. "You deserve it. Think of everything you can do, the treatment you can give your mother." The mention of her mother made Chloe look into the living room, where Sarah was asleep on the sofa bed. Even with their sudden success, they still couldn't afford to move to a bigger place or pay for more advanced treatments. This contract could change all that. "Okay," she finally said. "Let's do it." The next few weeks passed in a blur of frantic activity. Chloe was flown to Los Angeles, staying in a luxurious hotel that made her small apartment in Millbrook look like a broom closet. She spent entire days in the studio, working with renowned producers who wanted to hone her sound. "Chloe, darling," said Vanessa, the Starlight executive in charge of her project, "you have incredible talent, but we need to make it more commercial, more sellable." Chloe frowned, looking at the lyrics of the song she had just written. It was a song about her mother, about fighting against adversity. "But this is my story. It's who I am." Vanessa smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And it's a beautiful story, darling. But the public wants something more universal, something that everyone can relate to." Reluctantly, Chloe agreed to make a few changes. A line here, a chord there. Small changes that individually seemed harmless, but which together began to transform her music into something she barely recognized. At night, in her hotel room, Chloe called her mother, seeking comfort and guidance. "How are things over there, darling?" Sarah asked, her voice laden with longing. Chloe hesitated. She wanted to share her doubts, her fears, but she didn't want to worry her mother. "Everything's fine, Mom. It's just different from what I expected." Sarah, with that intuition that only mothers have, sensed the hesitation in her daughter's voice. "Chloe, always remember who you are. Your music comes from your heart. Don't let anyone change that." Her mother's words echoed in her mind over the next few days as she continued to work on the album. Every time a producer suggested a change that didn't feel right, Chloe felt a knot in her stomach. One day, during a particularly difficult recording session, Chloe finally exploded. "No," she shouted, surprising everyone in the studio. "That's not me. That's not my song." Vanessa quickly entered the studio, her face a mask of professional concern. "Chloe, darling, what's going on?" Chloe felt the tears burning in her eyes. "I can't do this. I can't sing these songs that mean nothing to me. I can't be this manufactured version of myself." A heavy silence fell over the studio. Vanessa exchanged worried glances with the producers before turning to Chloe. "Chloe," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I understand that this is difficult, but you need to understand how the industry works. We need to create something that sells, something that radio stations want to play." Chloe shook her head, feeling more lost than ever. "But what if what people want is exactly what I am? Isn't that what made them like my EP in the first place?" Before Vanessa could answer, Chloe's cell phone rang. It was Max. "Chloe," Max's voice sounded urgent, "you need to go back to Millbrook. It's your mother. She's taken a turn for the worse." Chloe's world seemed to come crashing down. All her worries about the album, about her career, suddenly seemed insignificant. "I have to go," she said, her voice shaking. "My mom needs me." Vanessa tried to argue, talking about deadlines and contractual obligations, but Chloe was no longer listening. She ran back to her hotel room, threw some clothes in a suitcase, and caught the first flight home. Throughout the flight, Chloe couldn't stop thinking. About her mother, about her music, about who she was and who she was becoming. She stared out of the airplane window, watching the city lights dwindle into tiny, bright dots. "Who am I?" she asked herself in a low voice. "What does it really matter?" When the plane landed in Millbrook, Chloe felt as if she was waking up from a strange and confusing dream. The familiar streets of her hometown seemed at once strange and comforting. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Max in the waiting room. His face was pale and worried. "How is she?" Chloe asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Max shook his head. "Stable for now, but the doctors are worried. She asked for you." Chloe entered the hospital room, her heart squeezing at the sight of her mother lying in bed, looking so frail and small. Sarah opened her eyes as she heard her daughter's footsteps. "My little girl," she whispered, a faint smile lighting up her face. "You're back." Chloe ran to the side of the bed, clutching her mother's hand. "Of course I'm back." "Come back to you, Mom." At that moment, looking into her mother's tired but loving face, Chloe felt all the doubts of the last few weeks dissipate. She knew who she was. She knew what her music meant, and she knew what she needed to do. "Mom," she said softly, "I have a new song for you. Do you want to hear it?" Sarah, her eyes shining with love and pride. And there, in that hospital room in Millbrook, Chloe began to sing. A pure, honest, and true song. A song about love, about struggle. It was the song she should have been singing all along. The routine at the hospital was monotonous, but Chloe was grateful for every minute she spent by her mother's side. Sarah was stable, but the doctors kept her under observation. Each visit brought a new hope, and decided that she would concentrate on her music and her mother, leaving aside the pressure of the industry. One day, as the sunlight filtered through her bedroom window, Chloe brought her guitar into the hospital. "Mom, I've written a new song. I want you to be the first to hear it." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Your music has always been my medicine." Chloe began to play softly, her voice echoing off the white walls of the hospital. The song spoke of the strength she had found in her mother, of how love could overcome any obstacle. As she sang, Chloe's heart filled with emotion, and she felt like she was finally reconnecting with what really mattered. However, as the days went by, the pressure of the outside world began to weigh on her shoulders again. Starlight Records was impatient. The executives wanted results, new songs, but Chloe was struggling to find inspiration. Instead, she was trapped in a cycle of anxiety and insecurity. After a visit to the hospital, Chloe was approached by a group of journalists on the way out. They wanted to know about her new album, about her mother, about her life. The questions began to pile up, and Chloe felt suffocated. "How do you cope with such sudden fame?" one reporter asked. "Do you worry about losing your authenticity in the music industry?" another added. The questions began to mingle in her mind, forming a whirlwind of uncertainty. Chloe, who had always been so confident in her music, began to doubt herself. What was more important, fame or the truth in her music? What did she really want to convey to the world? That night, after the marathon of interviews and the pressure of the studio, Chloe locked herself in her hotel room. The walls seemed to close in around her, and a sense of loneliness enveloped her. She tried to write, but the words just wouldn't come. Emptiness settled in her heart. "Why can't you do it?" she muttered to herself, feeling like a fraud. The weight of expectation was becoming unbearable. In a moment of desperation, Chloe decided to go outside. The streets of Los Angeles were bright, full of life, but she felt completely alone. As she walked, the sound of music echoed from the doors of clubs and restaurants, but she found no comfort in the melody. She found herself in a bar, where a small stage was occupied by a local singer. The man sang with all his being. His music was raw, honest. Chloe was mesmerized, the pain and joy shining in his eyes. This was exactly what she wanted to do, sing with authenticity. But the pressure of the industry had taken her away from her essence. As she realized this, Chloe felt the frustration and despair turn into tears. She walked away from the bar, unable to cope with reality. That same night, at a party organized by the record company, Chloe felt like an outsider. The music was loud, people were dancing and laughing, but she felt isolated. Everyone was there for the image she projected, not for the truth she carried inside. Sitting in a corner, Chloe watched the interactions around her, people trying to connect, but all seeming so preoccupied with their appearances. When a group of young people approached her, she heard comments about her music, but they weren't compliments. "She's just a girl from Millbrook," someone said. "She'll get lost in the industry." The words cut like knives. Chloe felt a wave of despair wash over her. She didn't want to be seen like this. She didn't want to be just a girl from Millbrook or a product of the industry. She wanted to be the artist who loved music, who sang from the heart. In a moment of emotional collapse, Chloe got up and left the party, seeking fresh air. Tears streamed down her face, and she sat on a bench on the sidewalk, feeling lost. The pressure she felt was oppressive, and the feeling that she was moving away from who she really was consumed her. Then her cell phone vibrated. It was Max, asking if she was all right. She hesitated, but decided to answer truthfully. "No, Max, I'm so lost. I don't know who I am anymore." Max appeared quickly, his face concerned to find her sitting alone. "Chloe, what happened?" She burst into tears, telling him about the pressure, the expectations, and how disconnected she felt from her music. Max listened intently, his gaze full of understanding. "Chloe, you don't have to be anything other than what you already are. Your music is your truth. Don't let anyone change it," he said, his voice soft and encouraging. "But what about the record companies? What about fame? What do I do with all that?" Chloe asked, feeling lost in a sea of uncertainty. "You do what your heart tells you. You sing your truth. And if people can't see that, then they're not the right people for you," Max replied. Max's words began to resonate inside her, like a light in the dark. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to regain the clarity she had lost. "I just want to be myself again." "Then do it," Max said. "Go back to your music, to your mother, and remember what got you here. Your authenticity is what makes you shine." That night, Chloe decided it was time to rediscover her essence. On her way back to the hotel, she picked up her guitar and began to play. The notes flowed from her fingers, and the music that was born was raw and true. It was a song about struggle, about the search for authenticity in a world that tried to shape her. It was about her mother, about the strength she had always found in her music, and about the importance of staying true to yourself. As she played, Chloe felt the chains that bound her were breaking. She was finally reconnecting with her true self. Tears flowed, but they were tears of liberation. When she had finished, Chloe looked out of the window, watching the city light up. The future was still uncertain, but now she was willing to face it with courage. It didn't matter about the pressure, the fame, or what the record companies wanted. What mattered was her music, her truth, and the love she had for her mother. That night, Chloe made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let herself get lost again. She would go back to her roots and sing her truth, not just to the world, but above all, to herself. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and preparations. Chloe had decided that instead of losing herself in the pressure of the industry, she would use her music to make a difference. With Max's help, she set about organizing a charity concert to raise funds for her mother's treatment and that of other people facing similar difficulties. Millbrook Square, where it all began, was chosen as the venue for this special event. The idea of returning home, to that place where her voice had found life, brought a comforting feeling. Chloe wanted the city that had seen her grow to know her new music, her new truth. While they were organizing everything, Max became an invaluable ally. He contacted local musicians, friends from the industry, and got some of them to perform for free, all in support of the cause. Word of the concert spread quickly, and the community came together, creating an atmosphere of excitement. On the night of the concert, the square was packed. Bright lights illuminated the space, and the energy was palpable. Chloe, dressed in a simple blue dress that her mother had loved, felt a mixture of nervousness and joy. She looked out over the crowd, recognizing familiar faces, school friends, neighbors, and of course her mother, who was sitting in a wheelchair at the front of the stage, surrounded by blankets and smiles. "Are you ready, my star?" Max asked, putting his hand on her shoulder. "Ready to sing my truth," Chloe replied, her heart racing. The first artist took to the stage, and the crowd applauded warmly. Chloe watched, feeling the camaraderie and love that filled the air. Each performance was a celebration of music and life. When it was finally her turn, Chloe's heart was about to explode. She walked onto the stage, picking up her guitar, and looked out at the audience. The lights were flashing, but in the midst of it all, there was one face that stood out: her mother's warm smile. Chloe took a deep breath, feeling the strength she had always found in this connection. "Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today," she began, her voice shaky but full of emotion. "This concert is for my mother and for everyone fighting the disease. Today I want to share some new songs with you that come from my heart." Applause echoed around the square, and Chloe began to play. The first song was the new composition she had written after the night of her breakdown. It was a song about fighting for authenticity, about finding your voice in the midst of chaos. The lyrics were raw and honest, and Chloe felt her emotions flow as she sang. Throughout the concert, she felt freer than ever. Every note, every verse, was a celebration of her journey, a tribute to her mother and all the people who had supported her. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of joy and liberation. As she sang, Chloe realized that the audience wasn't just there to listen to her. They were there to support her, to celebrate her truth. The energy was contagious, and the connection with the audience was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. When it came time to sing Lullaby for Mom, Chloe looked at her mother, who was smiling with pride. The song came from a deep place in her heart, and she knew it was the song that had defined her as an artist. At the end of the performance, Chloe felt lighter. The clapping and shouting of the crowd echoed in her mind, but what really mattered was what she felt inside. She had rediscovered herself, and her music was the key to this transformation. After the concert, as people dispersed, Chloe was met by Max, who hugged her tightly. "You were amazing, Chloe. The energy was electrifying." "Thank you, Max. I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, her voice full of gratitude. "You did it for yourself, Chloe. You sang your truth, and people felt it," he said, a glint of pride in his eyes. Chloe looked at the crowd, now dispersed but still vibrant with the energy of the evening. "I want to do more, not just for me, but to help other people who need it." Max smiled, sensing the determination burning inside her. "This is just the beginning. You can use your voice to inspire and heal others. Let's work on it together." The next morning, Chloe woke up with a sense of renewal. She picked up her cell phone and began to read the messages she was receiving. Social media was flooded with support and love. People were sharing videos of the concert, commenting on how her music had touched their lives. But there was one message that made her stop. It was from a record company that had attended the concert and was interested in working with her, but not to mold her into a product. They wanted Chloe to be real, to continue being who she was. Chloe smiled as she read the message. The world was finally recognizing her talent and her authenticity. She wouldn't have to sacrifice her truth for fame. She could have both. Determined to seize this new opportunity, Chloe called Max to share the news. "Max, you won't believe it. They want to work with me, but they want me to keep my essence." "That's wonderful, Chloe. You've made the right choice by being true to yourself," Max replied, his voice full of enthusiasm. The next few days were filled with meetings and planning for the new album. Chloe was more excited than ever. She knew that, with Max by her side, she could continue to share her music and her truth with the world. A month later, during a new performance, Chloe looked out into the audience and saw familiar faces, including that of her mother, who was there, stronger and full of pride. Her music resonated in every corner, and the connection she had created with the audience was unbreakable. With a twinkle in her eye, Chloe began to play. Each chord was a celebration of overcoming, love, and authenticity. She had found her path and was ready to face it, one note at a time. At that moment, under the bright lights and warm applause, Chloe wasn't just a girl from Millbrook. She was an artist, a woman who had struggled, rediscovered herself, and found her voice. And in doing so, she had also found her freedom. The future was ahead of her, full of possibilities, and Chloe was ready to embrace it, with music as her guide and hope as her beacon. Did this narrative stir your emotions? Don't forget to express your approval with a like. Take advantage of the Super Thanks feature, available just below the video, to offer direct support to the channel and contribute to the production of more fascinating content. Subscribe and remember to activate the bell to stay up to date with all the latest updates. And attention, a new exciting story is already ready to be displayed on your screen. Your participation means a lot to me, and I hope to count on your presence soon. Thank you very much for dedicating your time to this video.